They already know what you're thinking before you even say it out loud. And they resent that about you. Not because you are mistaken, but because you are absolutely right every single time. If you have ever felt like someone was drifting away from you, the harder you push to connect, stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I am about to share is going to completely reshape the most confusing relationship pattern you have ever gone through. Before we go any further, drop the word mirror in the comments right now. Just that one word. It tells me you are the kind of person who genuinely wants to understand yourself, and it helps this channel reach the people who truly need this message. We are building something meaningful here, and we need your support to get there. Now let us talk about something that almost nobody gets right. There is a specific kind of person who ends up in a relationship with an avoidant, and it is not random at all. It is not bad luck. It is not because you were naive or desperate or somehow broken on the inside. It is because you are wired in a very particular way that makes you almost magnetically drawn to someone who has constructed their entire emotional life around keeping people at a safe distance. That person is the super empath. And if you are one, the avoidant is not just present in your life. They are living inside your head completely rent-free every single hour of every single day. And the most unsettling part of this whole situation is that you might also be living inside theirs, and they will never once admit that to you. Let us start from the very beginning. A super empath is not simply someone who is sensitive. Sensitivity is something a lot of people claim about themselves. The super empath is something entirely different. They are someone who has developed an almost supernatural ability to read other people, to feel the emotional undercurrent of a room before a single word has been spoken, to sense when something is off, when someone is quietly hurting, when a person's words do not match what is actually happening deep inside them. This is not a gift that simply appeared out of nowhere. It was built over time. It was constructed through lived experience, often through having to navigate unpredictable and emotionally unstable environments while growing up, through learning very early in life that reading the room correctly could be the difference between peace and total chaos, between safety and real hurt. So the super empath became an expert, not in manipulation, not in control, but in attunement, in emotional translation, in picking up on the signals that most people never even notice are being quietly sent out into the world around them. Now enter the avoidant. The avoidant is a person who learned something very different during their early years. They learned that closeness almost always leads to some form of pain, that needing other people leads to disappointment, that the safest possible way to move through the world is to maintain an emotional buffer between themselves and absolutely everyone else around them. Not because they do not feel things. The avoidant feels deeply, sometimes far more deeply than the people around them could even begin to imagine. But they have a story they have been telling themselves for so long that it has started to feel like undeniable fact. And that story goes something like this: I am better off handling everything completely on my own. So they developed an entirely different set of coping skills over time. They became remarkably good at compartmentalizing, at appearing completely fine when they are anything but fine, at keeping conversations at a surface level when the real and meaningful conversation is happening somewhere beneath that surface, somewhere they will never willingly take you. They learned how to need people just enough to avoid feeling completely isolated, but never quite enough to ever feel genuinely and fully vulnerable. And then one day they met you. When a super empath meets an avoidant, something truly extraordinary happens, and it is not exactly what you might expect. It is not love at first sight, though it can absolutely feel that way in the moment. It is recognition, deep, almost cellular level recognition. The super empath looks at the avoidant and notices something that most other people would never pick up on in 100 years. They see right through the performance. They see past the carefully constructed self-sufficiency and the emotional distance and the casual indifference. They see the actual person underneath all of that armor, the one who is genuinely longing for something they do not quite know how to receive, the one who has been carrying something extraordinarily heavy and has been carrying it completely alone for a very long time. And the super empath thinks to themselves, I see you. I actually see you for who you really are, and I'm going to love you in a way that finally makes you feel safe enough to step out from behind the wall you have built. The avoidant, on the other hand, meets the super empath and experiences something they have very rarely felt before in their life. They feel genuinely understood without having to explain a single thing about themselves. They feel a kind of warmth that does not seem to demand anything in return, at least not right away. And for the first time in quite a long while, something deep inside them relaxes slightly. Not completely, but just enough. Enough to allow you a little closer than they usually permit anyone to come. And that is precisely where the whole complicated thing begins to unfold. In the beginning, everything feels like magic. The avoidant opens up in small but meaningful ways. They laugh a little more freely. They begin sharing pieces of themselves. They look at you like you are something genuinely unexpected that they never anticipated finding. The super empath feels it too, that rare and electric feeling of being truly seen by someone who does not usually allow themselves to see anyone at all. But then something begins to gradually shift between you. It is subtle at first, a message that takes slightly longer than usual to get a response, a plan that gets canceled with an explanation that feels just a bit too convenient to be entirely genuine. A conversation that starts moving somewhere real and meaningful and then somehow gets quietly redirected towards something completely neutral and safe. The avoidant is pulling back, not dramatically, not cruelly, just enough that you can feel it happening. And because you are a super empath, you notice absolutely everything. So you do what super empaths naturally do without even thinking. You lean in a little harder. You get curious about what is going on beneath the surface. You try sincerely to understand what has changed. You reach out a bit more frequently. You make yourself more available and more open. You put in extra effort to recreate that feeling from the early days when everything felt warm and close and beautifully real. And the avoidant steps back just a little further in response. This is the loop. This is the cycle that can continue for months, for years, sometimes for the entire length of a relationship without ever truly resolving itself. The super empath moves forward, the avoidant pulls away, the super empath eases up slightly on the pursuit, the avoidant inches cautiously back toward them, the super empath feels a renewed sense of hope, the avoidant retreats once more, and on it continues without end. But here is what absolutely nobody talks about openly. Here is the part that makes this entire situation so much more layered and complicated than simply a push and pull dynamic playing out between two people. The avoidant is not pulling away because they do not care about you. They are pulling away precisely because they do care, because the closer you get to them, the more real and terrifying the vulnerability becomes. And genuine vulnerability to an avoidant is frightening in a way that they may not even have the right words to explain to you, even if they genuinely wanted to try, which they mostly do not, because explaining vulnerability requires actually being vulnerable. And that is the very thing they have spent their entire life carefully and systematically learning to avoid at all costs. So they pull back not to cause you pain, but to shield themselves from the particular kind of devastation that comes from letting someone completely in and then losing them anyway. Or worse, letting someone all the way in and discovering that even with every single piece of themselves fully exposed, they are still somehow not enough in the end. That fear sits so deeply buried inside the avoidant that they have never once looked at it directly and honestly. They know it is somewhere inside them, but looking at it head on would mean acknowledging just how desperately they actually need real connection. And that need is the thing they most fundamentally cannot bring themselves to accept about who they are. Meanwhile, inside the super empath's mind, a very specific and utterly exhausting mental process is running almost constantly without any real pause. They are analyzing everything. They are replaying old conversations in their head, searching for the exact moment things began to feel different. They are reading deeply into the tone of a simple text message. They are noticing the subtle difference between how the avoidant looked at them yesterday compared to how they looked at them today. They are building theories in their mind and then taking them apart and then constructing entirely new ones to replace them. They are working tirelessly to solve the puzzle of this person they care so much about. Not because they are obsessive or overly clingy, but because their entire emotional system is wired to deeply attune to the people they love. And this particular person is sending out scrambled and contradictory signals that their system simply cannot process or make sense of, no matter how hard it tries. And so the internal processing never truly stops running. They wake up in the morning, and the very first thought that surfaces is about the avoidant. They move through their entire day with a background track quietly running about the avoidant and everything they said or did not say. They eventually fall asleep, and the last thing their exhausted mind is still working through is something the avoidant said or chose not to say or probably meant or might have meant in a completely different way. The avoidant has taken up full and complete residence inside the super empath's head, present at all times without ever paying rent. But here is the piece of this puzzle that nobody ever tells you plainly. You are also living inside the avoidant's head, not in the same consuming way, not with the same burning urgency or the same level of constant emotional processing, but you are absolutely there. You exist in their quiet moments when they are finally alone and the defenses drop ever so slightly, when something in their daily life unexpectedly reminds them of you. When they find themselves wondering in the stillness of the middle of the night what it might actually feel like to let you in completely and without any reservation. The avoidant thinks about you far more than they ever allow you to see. They feel far more than they ever choose to say out loud. They care far more deeply than their outward behavior would ever lead. They pull back strategically because they have read that this is what you are supposed to do when dealing with avoidance. They try giving more space. They try being warmer. They try being more direct. They try being less direct. They try journaling about it. They try talking to friends about it. They try listening to podcasts about it. And all of that trying is happening because the super empath carries a deep and sincere belief that if they can just discover the right key, this person will finally open up and they will get to have the relationship they have already felt glimpses of. The one that felt so real and so right in those early moments when the avoidant was genuinely leaning in. But here is the harder truth, and I want to say this with the full weight it deserves. The super empath cannot fix the avoidant, cannot heal them, cannot love them into security. Not because the love is not real, not because the effort is not genuine, but because the wound that drives avoidant behavior was formed long before you ever arrived. And it will only be healed if the avoidant themselves chooses to look at it, to name it, to do the real work of understanding where it came from and how it has been quietly running their life from the background ever since. And that is not something another person can do on someone else's behalf. No matter how deeply they love them, no matter how clearly they see them, no matter how patiently they wait, the avoidant has to genuinely want to change. And that wanting has to rise from inside them, not from the pressure of someone loving them harder. This is usually the part where something in the super empath breaks a little because the super empath has been functioning on the belief, conscious or not, that their love is powerful enough to shift things. And in many areas of life, their empathy and presence genuinely do create transformation in others. They do help people. They do build a kind of safety that allows people to slowly open up. This has been true for them many times before, but with the avoidant, it is different. And the reason it is different is precisely because of how powerful the connection feels. The stronger the connection, the more threatened the avoidant attachment system becomes, the more the avoidant retreats, and the more the super empath, who is naturally wired to attune, ends up pursuing someone who is not running from them, but from their own feelings. So where does this actually leave you? If you are a super empath who has been caught in this loop, the first thing I want you to understand is this: there is nothing wrong with you. Your capacity for feeling, your ability to see deeply into people, your willingness to love fully and without reservation, these are not weaknesses. They are genuinely extraordinary qualities, but they are being spent in a place where they cannot fully land. The problem is not that you feel too much. The problem is that the person you are feeling all of this toward has built an entire internal system specifically designed not to receive what you are trying to give. Not because you are offering the wrong things, but because receiving anything at that level of depth activates a terror response in them that they have been quietly managing for years. The second thing I want you to understand is this: you are not imagining the connection. It is absolutely real. The moments you felt it were real. The avoidant is not performing when they allow you close. What they feel is genuine. But feeling something genuine and being capable of building something lasting from it are two entirely different things. And the avoidant, until they commit to doing their own inner work, will only ever be able to give you the beginning of something over and over again without ever being able to carry it forward. Third, the obsessive processing you are doing, all of that analyzing and replaying and theorizing, it is not madness. It is your empathic system desperately trying to solve an unsolvable equation using the only tools it has. Your system was built to read people and then understand how to respond. But the avoidant is, in behavioral terms, deeply inconsistent. They are warm and then suddenly cool, present and then distant, open and then completely closed. An inconsistency like that to an empathic nervous system is like a puzzle that simply refuses to resolve itself. The brain keeps returning to it because the brain genuinely does not like incomplete patterns. The only way to quiet that constant processing is not to figure the avoidant out more thoroughly. It is to bring your attention back to yourself, back to your own needs, back to the honest question of what you actually require from a relationship and whether you are receiving even a small fraction of it. Because super empaths are so remarkably skilled at reading what others need that they often spend very little time sitting quietly with what they themselves need. Their own needs become secondary, sometimes entirely invisible. They pour so much energy into understanding and accommodating and being patient that the question of whether they themselves are truly being met often does not rise to the surface until the exhaustion becomes completely impossible to push down any further. And when that exhaustion finally surfaces, it arrives carrying feelings that are complicated and genuinely difficult to sit with. Anger, not the sharp, explosive kind, but the slow, burning kind that builds from having given so much and received so little in return. Grief for the version of the relationship that always felt almost within reach, for the version of the person who showed up sometimes and then quietly disappeared again. Shame sometimes, too, that uncomfortable feeling that perhaps if they had just been a little more, done a little more, loved just a little better, it all would have worked out differently. None of those feelings mean you were wrong to try. They simply mean you are human. And they mean something important is gently asking to be examined. Now let us talk about the avoidant's internal world more directly, because I believe this is where the most meaningful and healing reframing happens for super empaths. The avoidant does not experience your love the way you intend it to be received. When you move toward them with warmth and genuine care, and that particular quality of truly seeing someone that super empaths naturally carry, the avoidant's nervous system receives it as simultaneously the most beautiful thing in the world and as a direct threat, both feelings happening at exactly the same moment. The beauty is what draws them so powerfully toward you. The threat is what drives them just as powerfully away. The threat feels something like this inside the avoidant. If I allow this person fully in, I will need them. And if I need them, I become dependent on them. And if I become dependent on them, I risk losing myself. And if I lose myself, I lose the one thing that has always belonged entirely to me, my own emotional autonomy, my own internal sense of safety, the version of me that exists completely on my own terms without the vulnerability of being hurt by someone else's choices. This is the core belief operating beneath all avoidant relationship behavior. It is not a belief they consciously selected. It was handed to them through early experiences that quietly taught them that closeness equals the loss of self, or that needing people is genuinely dangerous, or that the people who are supposed to show up for you will eventually stop showing up. And so it becomes safer to never truly rely on anyone at all. The avoidant constructed a version of themselves that could survive without deep connection. A self that was self-contained, self-sufficient, capable of functioning at a high level without requiring much from others. And in many ways, that self is genuinely impressive. The avoidant is often highly competent, often quite successful, often someone that people observe from the outside and describe as having everything together. But beneath all of that, there is a much younger version of themselves who learned a particular set of rules that made complete sense within the environment they were created in, but that now make genuine intimacy nearly impossible to sustain. When the super empath sees that younger version, sees the deep longing hiding beneath the armor and instinctively reaches for it, the avoidant's entire internal system goes into a kind of alert. Not because you are wrong to reach out, but because the reaching itself activates the original wound. And the way that wound responds is to push away the very thing it most deeply needs. This is profoundly unfair to the super empath, and it is equally unfair to the avoidant themselves, because the avoidant is not the villain of this story. They are someone whose early experiences shaped them in ways that now actively work against their own deepest desires. And they often feel genuinely confused by their own behavior, confused about why they simply cannot let someone in, why the thing they most want is also the thing that frightens them most completely,